So can you tell us why you chose the desert? Like, why not go off into the Amazon or in the mountains of Utah where you've already learned how to survive? Why
We
the
probably
desert?
should have done the jungle.
Oh,
Looking back. What's up, everyone?
welcome back to Breaking the Grid, the podcast where we talk about the unseen sides of off-grid living and we answer some of your most common questions about leaving society and self-sufficiency. My name is Julia. I'm a beginner homesteader. I was a city girl literally a year ago, living in California, going to college and balancing a 9 to 5. And now I'm in the middle of nowhere, backwoods Texas, learning how to be self-sufficient. And we have Dan the man.
I am not a city girl.
No, he's not a city girl. He is one of the foremost experts in this field of off-grid living. And as we learned in the last episode, he's been surviving since almost since birth and eventually left society to live off the land with no contact with the outside world for 7 years. So go check out that last episode where we meet Dan and learn about his extraordinary life journey going from hunting in the Rocky Mountains to the military to working with NASA and then eventually leaving the grid and him coming back and all the accomplishments he's had since then. So go check it out. Somehow we were able to fit all of that into an hour-long episode. And again, he's one of the most interesting people I've ever met. Today's episode, we will focus on Dan's experience off the grid and what life was like out there for him and his ex-wife. Today's episode is heavily based on his book, Breaking the Grid. I literally went through the table of contents and looked at all of the subjects and pulled them out for all of our talking points today. So
Nice.
it'll be a really good episode if you are interested in learning about going off the grid.
Which everybody is,
Yeah.
especially nowadays.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to know about self-sufficiency with COVID and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess my first question for you is how would you define living off the grid personally for you? Because for so many people, there's so many different interpretations and levels of that. So, what does living off the grid mean for you?
I get this question a lot in seminars, lectures too. I tell people what we did, and I use the word self-sufficient or self-sustainable. And somebody always raises their hand and says, I'm self-sufficient or, self-sustainable. And I said, really? Like, because I've never met somebody that was completely self-sufficient like we were. And I really want to meet somebody. So I'm like, that's awesome. Like, come talk to me afterwards. I really want to like compare notes with you. And she's like, I grow my own food, so I'm self-sufficient. And I'm like, well,
That's just one part of it.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. And I want to celebrate and commend anyone for any level of self-sufficiency.
Mhm.
But yeah, growing your own food is one element and is actually one chapter in the book. Making your own power, handling your own sewer system, recycling your own goods, making your own goods, farming, raising, butchering, preserving. I mean, basically every single thing that anyone in society does for you now, you do for yourself,
Wow.
or you don't have it done.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you fix your own car, you rebuild your own engine, you blow glass if you want glassware.
Right.
You smelt iron if you want silverware and handles and for tools.
Wow.
So yeah,
Yeah. The whole
um,
9 yards.
the whole 9 yards
Yeah.
is self-sufficiency. Off the grid, I kind of relate that more with power, since it's the power grid
Oh, so that's what grid refers to.
came from.
Okay.
Yeah, getting off the power grid. So my house is
Ah.
100% on solar, but I still go to the grocery store. Maybe this is a
Ah.
typical situation for somebody.
Mhm.
And that is definitely a level of self-sufficiency. So yeah, you got self-sufficiency, self-sustainable, which is
Mhm.
very similar, and then being off the grid.
Right. And I think what she was doing was just what people consider now homesteading, right? Like your home is where you grow all of your food and you raise your own livestock, you have your own garden. And that's like a level of self-sufficiency, like you were saying. So there's different levels and interpretations to living life off the grid. Like we were talking about in the past episode about how there's probably someone out there right now who's living off of nature, in the Rocky Mountains somewhere.
Mhm.
And his story and his experiences off the grid is probably different from what you did.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
might be a more of a
Yeah.
survivalist
Like a
thing.
mountain man.
Yeah.
Yeah. When
And I get
people
that
think, yeah.
question too. How are you the foremost expert in survival? There's people out there that I'm like, I'm not.
Yeah.
Like, I almost know nothing about the survival
Survival.
aspect
Yeah.
of it. We were living, we were laying in hammocks, drinking
Yeah.
margaritas. I had a TV, I had a Super Nintendo we were
Yeah.
playing, but we
Yeah.
were completely off the grid, completely self-sufficient.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
So yeah, survival had very little to do with what we did. So like you said, there's
Gotcha.
different elements, different levels of that. So I try to specify I was 100% self-sufficient for 7 years,
Okay.
where we didn't leave our property once. We never saw anybody. Nobody came on our property, no contact. Yeah, as most self-sufficient as you can,
Gotcha.
because there are different levels of being
Right.
self-sufficient.
Yeah, definitely. And if you guys want to hear us go into the different levels and interpretations of self-sufficiency, we can definitely get deeper into that. But let's go ahead and move on. My next question for you is, what steps did you take to prepare for your off-grid adventures? Did you do any research? Like, can I go out there and do it today? Like, can I just leave everything and just go off into the wilderness?
I would advise against it, but you could, sure. I'm sure lots of people do.
Yeah.
We took a lot of steps.
Oh,
I researched a lot. I learned a lot of skills. I interned, I apprenticed with everything from working with metal to welding to automotive, roofing, heating, air conditioning, as many different fields as I could
gotcha.
to make the
Prepare.
change.
Yeah.
And for the listeners, I would suggest, I mean, you don't have to go all out like that. And that information is more available to you now on YouTube and books and everything. But I would advise just walking around the forest without shoes on.
Mm,
Just try that out. See how it is. Sleep on your concrete floor without a mattress, sheets, blankets, pillows. Again, we're not living to that level of survival, but just see if you can do that and how it feels.
mm,
Because in society, we're completely cut off from nature and completely cut off to what things feel like.
mhm,
And so just try to experience what things would feel like if you weren't in society. No air
mm.
conditioner.
I see. So where exactly did you go to live off the grid? Because I'm imagining you like in a jungle somewhere or in the wilderness of Alaska trying to survive. So can you kind of explain where you were at and how you came to that?
Yeah, let me try to paint a picture for you here. On one side of us, we have one of the largest national parks in the US, Big Bend
And you mean Texas?
in Texas,
Yeah.
but it's one of the largest national parks.
Oh.
Big Bend National Park is like third or fourth largest in the United
Oh.
States. So we have this huge national park on one side of us. On the other side of us is the Mexican border, the Rio Grande, and Mexico's most remote mountain ranges in Chihuahua, Sonora. It's like living in Montana and Wyoming and stuff. There's
Mm,
just nobody lives out there.
mm,
Then you have Big Bend State Park on the other side of us,
mhm,
which is a big state park. And then in between all that is just this vast Chihuahuan desert.
mhm.
And right in the middle of all that are the Badlands. It's actually what
Okay.
they're called, which some of you may have seen the new National Geographic's true crime docu-series. Badlands, Texas,
Mm.
which it's pretty good. It'll show you exactly where we're living if you haven't seen it. But this area, the Badlands, which is why they call it this, throughout history, throughout years, all the way up to today, the remoteness has given mobsters, drug kingpins, gangsters, general criminals a means of hiding and being outlaws from the law. It was known and still is known as a modern day Wild West.
Mm.
Anything goes, and it still very much is completely lawless,
Mm.
and that's exactly what we wanted.
What? So you were seeking that kind of environment?
Well, we weren't seeking the lawlessness
Yeah.
aspect. I mean, we weren't expecting to have a gunfight,
Oh,
in the
okay.
road,
Yeah.
but we didn't want the law there. We didn't
Wow.
want police. We didn't want a police state. We
Yeah.
don't want laws and rules and NOA guidelines and
Yeah.
societal structure.
Got it. Got
And
it.
that's goes with the lawlessness
Yeah.
aspect.
Okay. I understand now.
Like the nearest town, to kind of reiterate how ridiculous this place is, the nearest town, Lahidas, the mayor of this town is a goat.
What? Are
It's
you serious?
it's a goat, and it has been for years and years. It's just
What?
like there's no rules out here, there's no laws out here, no regulations. Nothing says we can't have a goat for a mayor. It
Oh
just
my
says it has to be
gosh.
born in Texas. It has to be a certain age,
What?
and and they're like, our goat was born in Texas, and it's 20 years old, at least 18 years old,
Oh
and
my god.
the goat was the mayor, and then it died, and they had put another goat in
Oh my
as the
god.
mayor, same name, but, yeah, and this place
Great.
is just no taxes, rattlesnakes, mountain lions, murders, disappearances, hikers getting lost, squatters. It's actually the location of one of my more interesting characters in the end, Survivors. He's out there in the Badlands after the apocalypse happens. So check that out and see if you can find the character that lives out here. But yeah, the Badlands was our place of
Wow.
reprieve.
That is insane. And again, this is in the deserts of West Texas,
Yeah,
right?
desert.
Wow. So can you tell us why you chose the desert? I mean, I understand the lawlessness and, the freedom to do whatever you want to create your own laws and rules and stuff, but the desert, why not go off into the Amazon or in the mountains of Utah where you've already learned how to survive? Why
We
the
probably
desert?
should have done the jungle.
Oh, yeah.
Looking back. But, the mountains, it's too cold, and again, you're not
Oh.
gonna have cooling and heating, or if you are, that's another huge element that you're adding to your workload,
Mm.
and it's already hard enough living out there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you bring up the jungle, that's a great place. It's close to
The
equator as
equator. Yeah.
possible. Food grows on trees in the
Yeah.
wild. You can grow anything in the ground.
Yeah.
Fish everywhere. In the desert, there's very little
Oh
life.
my gosh.
But it was warm and
Yeah.
didn't get cold in the winter times, and the night times cooled off. And the remoteness of the desert gave us a perfect blank canvas
Mm.
to do our little piece of society how we wanted to do it.
Right.
So
Right.
we painted a picture of what we wanted, and it worked out really well for us.
Wow. That is incredible.
And it was considered the last frontier in the United States.
Yeah.
Even Alaska is more, considered
Populated.
more
Yeah.
populated and, settled than West Texas.
Yeah. Yeah. It's rough terrain out there. So let's go ahead and have you walk us through a typical day of your life out there, like a day to day of off grid living.
Once
What
we
did
got
that look like?
established and
Yeah. Or I don't know, you pick whichever stage of off grid living you want to share with us. But I guess what people want to know is once you've had everything established,
yeah,
which we'll go more into what
it took
establishing
to
things. Yeah.
establish that, yeah.
Right.
Life was pretty easy once we got all the systems intact,
Got
and
it.
we would wake up when the sun comes out, no alarms. We'd wake up when we were rested instead of waking up prematurely. We
Mhm,
go to sleep when we're tired. There was no breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We ate breakfast when we were hungry. We ate
mhm,
again when we were hungry. We ate again if we got hungry,
mhm.
you know? We've gotten so, like I said, we've gotten so far away from these natural ways of living life. It's so
Not
disconnected from it
Oh, okay, go
as
ahead.
a
Yeah.
society, that we eat when we're not hungry and we go to sleep when we're not tired. And if we're not tired, we take a pill to make us tired. And if we're tired when we wake up, we drink a drug that makes us awake. And so there was none of that. We followed nature's clocks, and we maintained systems, hung out with the animals,
Yeah.
swam in our swimming pool,
Mhm.
just enjoyed life.
Wow. That is like the ideal thing people want when they think about living off the grid is living with nature, listening to your body, not having the stressors of today's society on them. But can you sort of, you were saying before about how you had to establish a lot of things. Can you walk us through a day in the life before you had those systems established?
Working from the moment we woke up to the moment we went to sleep.
Wow.
It was nonstop work. I retired from the society and the work, did 9 to 5, but I guarantee I worked more after retiring from that than I
Mhm.
ever did working in it because we were starving. We were
In the
thirsty.
beginning. Yeah.
And if we don't get our food, if we don't work to get water, you're going to die.
Mhm.
There was no calling 911 or going to the hospital. There was no hospitals. So yeah, a lot of work involved in those first couple years.
Gotcha.
So if you're not fond of working with your hands, this might not be right for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that there is a lot to living off the grid, but everyone's first question is always about food and water. And as soon as you said, oh, we left society and went off to live in the desert, I'm like, what did you grow out there? What did you eat out there? How did you get anything to work for you out there?
Yeah, we realized really quickly that there's no farming in the desert. Society, and I touched about this in the previous episode, and I will more later, but society lied to us about a lot of stuff. They showed us cartoons as a kid and shows where you just drop a seed and the water
Mhm.
sprinkling down on it, and the food crop or flower
Yeah.
grows, and Mickey Mouse is like, woo.
Yeah.
We dropped seeds on the ground and poured the water on it, and the water hit the ground and instantly turned to steam. And we're like, okay, this isn't a feasible means of food production.
Wow.
And we actually got a little scared how we were going to grow food there.
Wow.
And our first attempt was underground. So we dug this huge trench, covered it with a berm, and had grow lights in there, and we're growing in raised beds, but still in the dirt. And that worked. It was cooler underground, but we didn't get the production that we needed to sustain 2 people full
Hmm.
time. So that's when I started dipping into hydroponics and aquaponics.
Hmm.
And that just took off. I mean, the environment for aquaponics in a closed system, we got 10 times the food production, 10 times larger food production, 2 times healthier fruits and vegetables. It's all because the plants they're growing aren't putting energy and calories into building stronger stems because the wind's blowing them, or they're overheated by the sun, or it's too cold, or pests, or so they get to put all that energy into better, more healthier fruit.
Gotcha.
So hydroponics in the desert was the way to go. Also, a big one was our livestock
Hmm.
choices. No cows. And that was another societal lie.
What?
You have a farm, you have cows,
Yeah.
but you have one guy and a girl your size
Yeah.
butchering a 1.5 ton cow. First of all, it'd be impossible. And then we'd spend days or weeks butchering and separating different meats. And then your fridge or your cold storage would be stacked with 2 tons of cow meat, and
Mhm.
it'd all go bad before you had a chance to eat any of it.
Mhm.
So goats were the much better choice,
Mm.
and specifically Boer goats because they're from Africa and they could take the heat a lot better.
Mhm.
We could butcher one, a kid, and have 10 meals before it ever
Yeah.
spoiled.
And by kid, he means baby goat, not human kid.
So she thinks. And then another one was like, you're going to live off the grid. You got to have a horse, to
Mhm.
pull your plow and ride on. And those TV shows, Westerns and stuff was just not the way to go in the desert.
Mhm.
Burros were the workhorse. They
Mm.
survived the heat. They needed very little water. They could work and last a lot longer than any horse could. So, like, burros are a little bit different than donkeys. Donkeys were bred for colder weather. They have longer hair. And burros came from southern Spain, where it was hotter and came in through Mexico, and they are used to the heat a lot more. But I get a lot of people that go down to these different places or up to cold weather places,
Mhm.
and they just pick and choose what animals they want.
Mm.
I've always liked the German Shepherd, so I'm gonna bring a German Shepherd
To
down
the
to the
desert.
desert,
Yeah.
and that dog is, like,
Aw. Suffering.
suffering in hell. There's some short-haired breed dogs that are great in the desert, like,
Mhm.
we have Rhodesian Ridgebacks. And certain chickens do better in the desert. Peacocks and turkeys versus ducks and geese, which
Mhm.
are suited more for
Waterfowl.
cold
Yeah.
weather. Yeah,
Right.
with their down.
Right.
And so you really got to pick out the animals that are better for the desert rather than which ones you personally want.
Gotcha.
That
So
makes
there's
sense.
a lot of research that goes into even just looking into the kind of livestock that you want to have and have established out there when you're living off the grid. So did you ever tame any wild animals out there for your livestock or tame or work with any wild vegetation out there like foraging or growing, I don't know what grows in the desert, cactus or
Yeah,
something?
we ate a lot of cactus.
Oh, okay.
The cactus pads and the
Yeah.
tuna fruit that grows off your
Mm.
typical cactus. There's another cactus that's kind of small and low laying to the ground. The fruit of it's called pitaya, and it's incredible. It's just like a huge strawberry
Mm.
or kind of a kiwi strawberry mix. We did a lot with mesquite seeds, made flour out of mesquite seeds. There was ocotillo, and the ocotillo flowers have some nectar in them that you can eat the nectar right away, but you could make teas and stuff out of it.
Mm.
There's a lot of plants in the desert that you can eat. It's not just a desert; it is a growing, alive place. You
Yeah,
just got to know where to look.
right.
As far as animals, taming animals, down on the Rio Grande, there's a lot of wild burros. At
Mhm.
some point in history, they were using burros to bring across gold from Mexico or something and just released them all. And there's just tens of thousands of wild ones. And we had a wild burro come on to her. I think she was actually living there before we got there.
Mhm.
And she kind of tamed us. She helped us a lot. She protected our livestock from mountain lions. I had to suture her mouth up. She had about 27 stitches in her mouth because the lion ripped her mouth open.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but that's another story.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
she was with us the whole time, and
Wow.
none of our animals were ever fenced in or in cages. Everybody
Mm.
was free to roam.
Yeah, that's the whole part of self-sustaining is that these animals are gonna be able to feed for themselves, fend for themselves, and whatnot.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
don't feed them, you don't water them. Once you get your systems going,
right.
they're all free roaming.
Wow, that's incredible. What about water? What did you do for water out there in the desert?
So originally, I had learned how to drill a well.
Yeah.
Living in Utah, my grandpa was a water well driller, and I learned how to drill wells the old hard way,
Mhm.
which we actually hand drilled the well that's here in the bunker, inside the
Mhm.
bunker. So I had went out there with the idea that I was going to drill a well, and after talking to some people that had been out there for years, I quickly learned that the water level was like 1,000, 1,500 feet down. and you're not going to be drilling a well 1,500 down by hand.
No.
So we went with rainwater catchment.
Mm.
So we had three 10,000-gallon water tanks hooked up to our gutters, caught all the water, and it was more than enough to run our hydroponics, our aquaponics, all the water we needed, all the water the
Mhm.
animals needed, more than enough water for everything.
Do you suggest that people find a location closer to a river? I know you said you were closer to the Rio Grande. Was that helpful at all for you when you were looking for water?
No, we were miles away.
Oh, okay.
We had a lot of acres. We had
Oh,
hundreds and hundreds of acres. So we had a little creek that was just down by down the cliff from where we built the house, but it was seasonal. So it was
oh,
only there when they're in the rainy
gotcha.
season. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, that would be a critical element now if I were to go off the grid again. I have to be right on even a little creek,
Mhm.
not only for water, but food and electricity through water turbines
Mm,
also. It's just, you got solar panels, which is powering whenever the sun's out. You got
mhm,
wind turbines, which is powering, generating electricity whenever the wind's blowing.
mhm,
But a water turbine, those creeks move 24 hours a day
mhm.
all year long, and it's always generating electricity.
Gotcha, gotcha. So you mentioned a little bit about you wish you would have built your shelter closer to a water source. Can you sort of go into what kind of shelter you built while living off the grid, what materials you use, and the motivations behind building a shelter like that?
Yeah, so when we went there and scouted out our property,
Hmm.
which after 7 years, we still didn't see all of our property. There
Wow.
was parts of it we never even knew that were there.
How many acres was your property that you bought out
Almost
there?
3,000 acres, I think.
Wow. It's a
Yeah, it was a
lot of
pretty
land.
epic place. We found Indian ruins and carvings and tools and,
Fossils.
yeah,
Yeah.
dinosaur bones that were this big.
Insane.
But, yeah, so when we went there, it was the rainy season. So I went there and it was the rainy season, the creek's going.
Mhm.
I find a cliff, right in the center of the property. So even if neighbors built on the edge of theirs, we would never hear them or see them.
Mhm.
On the cliff for good airflow, I said, "This is the spot." It was great for that moment, but then when the dry season came, river's gone, and I'm on top of a cliff, so if I'm gonna drill a water well, now I have to go even further.
Whoa.
So it wasn't I probably should have waited a year
Yeah,
and checked at different points to get a better evaluation of the perfect spot.
right.
As far as materials, we used a lot of rock. We made adobe out of clay and sand, straw that was just growing wild. Believe it or not, the dung of our burro luna. Yeah,
You use that as building material?
you mix it in with the adobe,
Oh my
and
goodness.
when you make your bricks or you fly it, it's supposed to keep off flies.
Right.
And we never really had flies, so I never had it without the dung in it, so I can't say
Ah.
if we had flies before, but the old timers swore by it, so we put it in there and seemed to work. We didn't have a fly issue.
Wow, that's incredible. So what exactly did your shelter look like? I know it was very unique. It was like open, you didn't have any doors or window, which sort of makes sense for living in the desert. You know, you don't need to really protect yourself from the elements as much other than the heat. But can you sort of explain why the design of the shelter, why you built it the way that you did?
Yeah, it was like kinda like a yurt,
A yurt.
but or a dome home or something, but
Okay.
it was as close to that shape as we could get.
And a yurt is like,
A yurt
what
is
is
like
that?
a it comes from Mongolia, I think. They would take skins of animals and sew them together and build a circular hut with a
Mm.
cone roof, and that was easy to break down and move,
Mm.
kinda like the North American, Native
With the
American
teepees? Yeah.
teepees, version of that. But it's a little bit bigger, it's more spacious, you have furniture
Mm.
and beds and everything. So we tried to build that out of adobe. It worked. It kept it cool. We didn't have, like I said, our walls were wide open. We didn't really have walls, no doors, no windows, because there's no need for them.
Mhm.
The wind comes through, it stays cool in the summertime, and there really was no winter. Never ever got below freezing, and it was all built out of natural materials for free, and that's where we lived.
Wow. That is pretty cool. Yeah, your shelter and your designs for that shelter is very unique because in my mind, when I'm thinking about people living off the grid, it's completely different from what it looks like when you lived off the grid. So it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, I think it's a huge misconception by society is that you have to live in a cave
Yeah,
or
that's what
in a
I was.
tent
Yeah,
and have candles and
yeah. But before you got the shelter going, you've told me before that you lived in a camper
yeah,
for a year or so.
yeah, almost 2 years, I think.
Oh my
It
gosh.
was a cab over camper. It wasn't even pull behind,
Oh my gosh.
and,
So it's a little tiny thing.
I think it was 8 feet long and 4 or 5 feet wide or something,
Yeah,
and the bed part was over the cab of your truck.
your truck, yeah.
I loved it. Like, we could lay in bed playing Super Nintendo, and I could reach over and get a beer out of the fridge, without ever leaving bed.
Yeah,
She hated it.
I bet.
No room to move
Oh
around,
my
can't cook
gosh.
in it, and but we all were only there for about a year and a half, a year and 9 months or something.
Yeah, so theoretically, someone can survive out there with just a camper, right? Because you were able to survive out there for almost 2 years. So you don't technically need to build a shelter to the,
No.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanna live a rougher life, you could live in a camper, you could live in a tent, you could
Mm-hmm.
live in nothing,
Mm,
just a sleeping bag or something, or a
mm-hmm.
cave, or we had some caves underneath the cliff that we had food storage in to keep
Mm.
cold, like a cellar. They would've been perfect to live in, and a lot of those people out in the Badlands just haul a camper or trailer out there and live in those.
Wow.
You have to make your own methane for gas because they're all gas stoves and everything, or build a solar cooker or something.
Gotcha, gotcha. So with talking about like the house and shelter and stuff like that, my next question is what about things like household products? Like what did you do for toilet paper?
We made it.
You made your own
Yeah.
toilet paper?
We made toilet paper. At first we were using washable rags that you
Yeah,
could just like kinda like a diaper, you clean the baby with a rag and then you wash it, and
right.
or at least that's how they
Reuse,
used to do.
repurpose,
Yeah.
recycle. Yeah.
And so we did that for a while, and then we kinda ran out of they just disintegrate after
Hmm.
so many years. So we started making toilet paper out of mesquite and cactus cellulose fiber, how they used to make paper with a paper mill and a paper frame. And we could make string and then with string make rope that way too
Hmm.
with the cellulose fiber. That worked great. More
Wow.
work, but it was definitely easy to do.
Oh my goodness. So even everything that you can imagine right now in your household, from your utensils to toilet paper to blankets to clothes, you had to make all by yourself out there at some point.
Tools, if you
Tools,
have
yeah.
a motor or something and a part breaks in it, you have to be able to melt down the iron to
Make
make
that
your
part.
form it,
Gosh.
make the part. If you have a light bulb that doesn't work anymore, you know how to blow glass and insert your copper wires and connect your cone and
My goodness.
melt down some aluminum cans to get the C12 threaded cone on there.
Wow.
We made candles, out of with our beeswax,
Mhm.
and there's a cactus out there called Candelea, I think it's called. It produces wax. Yeah, I made an arc welder with our solar arrays battery bank, so
Mhm.
I could weld parts that broke and
Wow.
fix things and build things. We made tortillas out of the flour, mesquite
Yeah.
flour. We made glass from sand in a
Wow.
kiln.
That is insane.
Yeah, you name it, we made it.
Wow. That is incredible. I don't think people realize all of the things and how things are made. I remember coming here for the first time and I was so used to just buying something new. Do you remember in the very beginning? I was like, oh, that charger is broken. We'll
Mm,
just toss it and get a
yeah.
new one. And your mentality was, we don't need to get a new one. We can fix this
Take it
charger.
apart,
Yeah,
figure out which
right,
diode is broken, and pull it
right.
from another electronics thing.
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't think we realize all of the material and effort and intellect that is put into making something as simple as or what we think is as simple as our phone.
And it also kind of shows you what you actually need out there.
Yeah, can you go
So,
into that? Like, did you have phones and computers, or I mean, probably not, right?
no, we burned our phones and computer, but that's a whole nother
Yeah,
episode. We burned everything.
yeah,
We took some stuff with us, of course.
yeah.
We took our Super Nintendo, our
Mhm.
TV.
Yeah.
You quickly realized that you didn't need 80% of the stuff you brought.
Mm,
That was hard to know.
mhm,
There was nothing telling, like my book is now, there
mhm,
was nothing telling us what you actually need out there.
mhm,
We burned most of our stuff and took what was left that we thought we would absolutely need.
mm.
Turned out we didn't need most of that. So
Gotcha.
as Americans, though, we have so much stuff
Yeah.
that we don't really need. And then we buy more stuff. And
Yeah, just to have it, not even to use it. Like, I
yeah,
know people who buy a boat that's just sitting in their garage and they never ever take it out to the lake or the river, and I'm just like, "Why do you have that?"
yeah.
Yeah. Living with the bare minimum like you did out there really, I guess, puts more important to what is more important in your life that you use on a daily basis. So what I think is very essential is your physical health when you're out there. What were some of the dangers that you faced out there that might actually cause you harm?
Scorpions, black widows, brown recluse, rattlesnakes, bites,
Oh my gosh. See,
lacerations,
that
broken
scares me.
arms.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we had to deal with every single one of those.
What did you do? Like, if you got hurt, and again, we're talking about the middle of the desert, there's nobody around, the closest hospital is like 6 hours away or something. So, what did you do when you got hurt? And I'm sure you got hurt several times. How did you manage that?
Well, even though the nearest hospital is 6 hours away, for us, it wasn't an option
Mm,
because that would mean going back to society, and we weren't self-sufficient anymore.
right.
And we were self-sufficient till death. So
Oh,
we had planned on being out there no matter what. If we had gotten sick or gotten hurt, there was no option to go in the hospital. So we got bit by scorpions, I mean, stung by scorpions and bit by black widows and bit by rattlesnakes. And it's another one of those things that society lied to us about,
mhm.
that rattlesnakes will kill you. I mean, don't get me wrong. It hurts like, and you probably wish you were dead, but rattlesnake's not gonna kill everybody. Maybe if you're very old or very young,
um,
but yeah, there's not many snakes in the world, or at least in the United States, that can actually physically kill you.
right.
Spiders, same things. Black widow bites, wasp stings, scorpion stings. I had a big laceration on my arm that we had to put about 14 stitches in. I broke my left arm. She said it, made a cast, and we put the cast on, cut the cast off after a few months.
Gosh. Did you
Um,
have any like anesthetic? Is that what you call it? Like painkillers to when you set the bone and stuff like
we
that?
iced it down so your
Kind of
nerves are
numb.
kind of
Yeah.
numbed up. Same with the laceration.
My goodness.
We made our own antibiotics. We made pure alcohol, and then you get sick because you're going to get infected. We made penicillin later, but there is
Wow.
no natural antibiotic, nothing that we knew of out in the
Yeah.
desert. So you're going to get sick. You're going to get bacteria in there,
Yeah.
and you get sick. And if I died, I died,
My
and she
goodness.
would bury me out in our cemetery, and that's it.
That
And
is
people die
insane.
out there like that. People out there, they die. Like I said, they disappear. They die out there. And that was what we signed up for.
Mm. So did was it you who mostly got hurt?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm assuming so.
Like, now working with me,
Yeah.
like I'm always getting hurt when I work with my hands and stuff.
Yeah.
Every single time I get
He
3 or
gets
4
cuts.
cuts and
Yeah. Bruises.
yeah, I'm always the one that's getting cut. One thing that didn't happen much up there was getting sick from like colds and flu,
Mm,
now COVID.
yeah.
Like the flu virus doesn't exist out there. COVID doesn't exist out there. These are viruses that are transmitted and transported by humans. There's no humans out
Um,
there.
I see. Okay.
So it doesn't exist. We never got sick the whole time.
But if neither of you were sick, you
There's
couldn't
no
pass that along.
outside. It's like a
I see.
sealed, contained biodome or something
Wow.
that, the viruses can't be transported in.
Okay. So you were more worried not about the sickness, but more about like wounds and cuts and hitting
Falling
yourself.
off a cliff or
Okay.
something or yeah, and then also our animals got hurt all the time. Like I said, Luna got a
Yeah.
huge laceration in her mouth, sutured all that up and, set broken legs in my goats and, um, worms and different things affecting our chickens and
That's insane. So did you learn you said that eventually at some point you learned how to develop penicillin. Did you have to learn how to do all of these medical things along the way, or did you prepare for this ahead of time? Like, did you take classes, or
yeah,
how did
like,
you
we
prepare
didn't
for that?
rediscover the penicillium bacteria
Uh,
that
okay, I
secretes
thought okay.
penicillin. No, we kinda knew how to take bread and how to purify the bacteria that grows on it,
Yeah,
um, and I'm not sure that we ever purified it enough to be a very effective antibiotic,
yeah,
but we didn't die,
yeah. Just
so
so people don't know, penicillin is a type of mold, and that's what Dan means by taking bread and purifying the penicillin. It's that white mold that grows on
it's
your
a white
bread.
turquoise.
Yeah.
It's actually not the
I
mold.
think I have it. Let me
You got some growing?
yeah, I have
We
some
should
growing.
purify it
Yeah.
and start selling penicillin.
I'll be right back, guys.
It's not the mold itself. The mold itself is called penicillium or something like that, and when that bluish green mold, um, defecates, it defecates penicillin.
Mhm. So, for the viewers who are watching, this is a piece of moldy bread. And so you'll see that the color on this bread is you see these little white spots here, right?
The
And
white
then
spots are actually a different,
oh, they're a
mold.
different kind of
Yeah, the
mold.
blue-green one is penicillin.
Oh, okay. So forget the white part. It's the blue green part that is the important stuff. So you would take that mold and just let it grow on the bread, and then how do you purify it?
That's a long
Oh,
process.
okay.
First,
It's
you
in the
gotta
book. So
yeah.
yeah, go
First, you
read the
gotta
book if you really
sterilize
want.
your jars and everything so there's not other bacterias growing in there, and then you
Okay,
gotta make sure
gotcha.
you actually have penicillium and not other and then you heat it up to certain temperatures and yeah, it's all in the book, How to Make
Yeah,
Penicillin from the book. But, yeah, we didn't die, so maybe it worked. I'm
yeah.
not sure.
It's incredible. Oh my goodness. Going back to the question, did you have any previous medical education that you brought out there, or how did you know all this stuff?
So, like everything else, I had, studied medicine.
Right.
I learned how to weld, I learned automotive repair, I learned basket weaving,
Yeah.
and I did my pre-med at UT. I took emergency management courses. Of course, every first aid, CPR course you could take. We had books. There are books on self-care and emergency care out there. And we had those. It was funny because I was very experienced in a lot of things. They're very knowledgeable and educated in a lot of things. My ex had already known a lot of these medical things because in Mexico, they don't run to the hospital every time they have a
Mm,
cold or they break an arm or something.
yeah.
A lot of these things are already and always have been treated at home in
Hmm.
Mexico and a lot of second and third world countries.
Yeah, like my culture, my parents didn't trust the Western medical system, so we did a lot of herbal remedies and learning how to treat your ailments at home. Just the bare minimum of the ailments, but enough to make sure that we knew what herbs did what and what works and what didn't. So that's invaluable too. So with all the dangers and medical attention that was needed and the added element of age and getting older out there, you had to develop some form of sustainable system to help you, maintain things as you age and as you hurt yourself and whatever, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And
So
that was the main reason why it was so important to establish these different permaculture systems that would take care of themselves.
mhm. Because you can go out there and not establish those systems, right? Like,
Yeah,
you
you can
can.
walk 2 miles down to Rio Grande every
Right,
morning, get 4 buckets of water and come back.
right. But having those systems made your life a lot easier, right? Yeah, and especially as you age, once you hit if you survive out there to your 60s, at 60 years old or 70 years old, it's gonna be hard for you to walk every day to the river to get your water source. So, can you sort of go into how you develop sustainable systems to support self-sufficiency while living off the grid? And is it really necessary?
I definitely wouldn't say it's necessary. I think that humans have not had permaculture systems for the majority of humans' existence.
Mhm,
Most of the old timers out there, in fact, most of the residents of the Badlands, for some reason, are very old. I think they get to retirement age of 60, 65, and say, no more of this. I'm leaving society.
mhm,
But they don't have that enlightenment till they're that age. And that's when they go out there.
mm,
So it's absolutely possible they're doing it every day out there. We didn't want those hardships.
mm,
So we built the automated rain catchment system with float valves that would automatically fill up containers of water where all the livestock had to drink. Our hydroponic systems had float valves in them, so when the plants drank water or water was evaporated, it filled back automatically again.
mhm. You sort of talked about solar and wind power. Can you kind of elaborate on other renewable energy sources that you eventually learned how to harness while you were out there?
So we first run a generator,
Generator.
and
Okay.
in the beginning, we were running back and forth 3.5 hours or something to get gas for the generator.
Okay.
And then I
To the
learned
closest town or
Mhm,
closest gas station.
yeah.
Okay.
And then I learned that I could modify it a little bit to run on propane,
Mhm.
which I could get a big 5-gallon propane tank or a 10 or 20-gallon propane tank, and it would run a lot longer than liquid fuel. So I did that, and that was a lot better. But then, and I had always planned on harnessing the methane from our compost toilets, which we also built. So we started harnessing and pressurizing our methane to run the generator of our waste
Mhm.
products,
Wow.
also food wastes and just anything that's
Very
biodegradable.
renewable. Yeah. In case you're wondering what he did with all of his waste, that's what he was doing with the.
We were renewable before renewable was
Yeah.
cool. So yeah, we had our fuel systems for the generator, but eventually I wanted to get off
The
generator
generator. Yeah.
and combustion fuels altogether. So the first thing we did was make our own solar panels.
Mm,
We made them with copper plates. This is all over the web now, but
mhm.
you cook one side of a copper plate and you have conversion of the photons.
Why solar power? Is it just because the environment you were in out in the desert, it was the easiest renewable energy to get?
In the desert, it's like sunny
Yeah,
345 days a year.
yeah.
So we had a lot of sun power out there.
So it depends on what environment you were in. So if you were closer to a river, then your first source would have been hydropower.
Yeah.
Okay, I see.
Actually, I have a video on our YouTube channel,
Yeah.
Dan Martin Human, of my first water turbine that I
Oh.
built. And it's a big water wheel thing,
Mhm.
and it produced a lot of electricity. So we had the water turbine, we had solar panels that were really inefficient. We're talking like half watts per cell.
Oh my gosh.
Now they're like thousands of watts. But again, we had so much sun
Yeah.
and so much roof space that, yeah, and we didn't need electricity. We didn't have air conditioners. We didn't have
Mm.
electric stoves. We had LED TVs. And
Mhm.
so we didn't have much electricity generation.
Got it. Got
And
it.
then I made our first wind
Mm.
turbines, and we used the motors out of an old treadmill. Used a PMM motor, some PVC pipes cut down for
Wow.
wind blades, pulled it up about 30 feet. To our surprise and amazement, we had electricity generation.
That's amazing. How long did it take you to establish these systems, though? Because I know that we'll go deeper into what establishing the systems mean in a later episode. But how long did it take you?
A little over a year. We
Okay.
were going in and out off on and off the property for about a year and a couple months. And that was to get parts and tools and things that we were needing that we didn't know we would need. And then still food because our food systems hadn't generated enough to fully feed us.
Hmm.
And
And you
so,
were living in the camper at this time, right? This
yeah,
was the years that you were living before building that shelter and having all of your systems set up and stuff.
yeah, about a year and a couple months. And then it took us about 8 months to build the octagon house.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Wow. So life out there, okay, so I guess life out there was hard in the beginning. You were working nonstop. It was hot. You were living in a cramped space and you had to take life on a day-to-day basis surviving out there. But once you had those self-sufficient systems established, life became a lot easier for you and you got to live the life that you were hoping to live when
Dreaming.
dreaming
Mm,
of, right, when you moved out there. That's incredible. So, if you guys want to learn about everything that we've talked about today, from picking and choosing livestock to making your own toilet paper to finally establishing your own self sufficient systems, it's all in Dan's book, Breaking the Grid. Again, this episode is just sort of recapping all of those points. So go check it out. It's a great book if you want to learn about how he did all of the things that he did out there.
it's available at
It's available at familius.com. We'll make sure to have the link below. So just one last question for you, Dan. Would you do this again if you had the chance to? And do you recommend living life off the grid for our viewers?
yeah, I think that the societies we've built, these super powers, these super societies, is extremely not only unhealthy for the planet, but as individuals too. And we'll get into more of this in a different episode, but this lifestyle is just look around. It's not working.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked when we were in smaller villages.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't do it again, me and my wife.
Mm-hmm.
I would do it, and what we're actually planning on doing is in with a group of people,
Mm-hmm.
and, that's what we're kind of forming here, and we're open to, members of forming a self-sufficient commune in the bunker.
Yeah, absolutely. Today was a really great episode to pick Dan's brain about everything that he's gone through living off the grid. In the next episode, we're going to talk more about what Dan did to prepare to leave off the grid, all of the classes he took, finances, and even going down to the nitty gritty of looking for the location. We're going to talk about all of that stuff in the next episode. So, next week, tune in for that.
Bye. Thanks for tuning in to another episode. Be sure to pick up a copy of my book, Breaking the Grid, at familist.com, link below. And of course, please like, subscribe, and share.